What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm back here once again for another comprehensive NBA player prop preview. I'll be looking at all 10 games. I'll be looking at all the key players. We'll talk through their matchups. I'll tell you what's good, and I'll tell you what isn't. We use this type of analysis every single day. I share tips, I share picks, and we've been killing it lately. 4.3 units profit yesterday. Over the last 3 days, 16.5 units profit. So I'm smiling from ear to ear right now. Things are going real well. Surprisingly, this winning trend of mine has really started since I started using Outlier. So if you're interested in using Outlier, which I'll be sharing with you today, you can use the link in the description box below. It'll give you a 7-day free trial. I encourage you to check it out and do some research on your own before you make your final picks. I'll go through all the props today for you anyway. We'll talk through form. We'll talk through matchups. Hopefully, we can cover it all. Ultimately, to help you make the best decision possible before you decide to place that bet. Now, let's go. We're kicking it off with the New York Knicks versus the Orlando Magic. Firstly, let's have a quick conversation about lineups. Dante DiVincenzo, Isaiah Hartenstein, all game time decisions in this one. We already know that OG, Randall, Mitchell Robinson, all out for the New York Knicks. So they could be quite depleted in this game. So somewhat limited matchups, but we'll go through the key players which are currently available. Starting with Jalen Brunson, and we're going to look at his points prop first. His line for this game is at 29.5 points. Firstly, looking at his last 10 games, he's done okay. He's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. In terms of the matchup, the Orlando Magic allow the 8th fewest points to point guards on the season. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 consecutive games against the Orlando Magic. So my gut tells me to lean to the under. But personally, he's quite talented. He's more than capable of covering this line regardless of who the matchup is. So I wouldn't feel confident taking a Jalen Brunson under based on what we've seen there. But looking at his assist prop, that is at 7.5. And if you take the over, you can get that for plus money right now. Now, looking at his last 10, he's covered this in 4 out of those 10 games. The matchup, the Magic allow the 4th fewest assists to point guards on the season. In terms of head-to-head matchups, he's gone over this in 1 of his last 3. He did have 8 assists in his last matchup against the Magic. But if all these players are out, who the hell is he going to pass to? So, look, until the lineups are really confirmed, I wouldn't have any confidence betting on Jalen Brunson right now. Because if they're all out, he'll have a higher usage rate. But what if they get blown out, right? And they're not competitive? Chances are he's going to go under anyway. So, Jalen Brunson, just going to put a pause on him for a minute, and we'll wait to see who else is playing. Looking at the Orlando Magic props, we've only got the 2 available. It's Banchero and Franz Wagner. So let's check out Banchero firstly. Now, the easiest pick you can make based on trends right now is on his assists. So check that out. He's covered this in 15 out of his last 20 games. We know he's covered this in 10 consecutive games in a row. Check that out. So the line's at 5.5. The line was also 5.5 against the OKC Thunder. It is a little bit juiced, minus 130. I personally don't like playing single bets or odds that way. So for me, I look at this as would I take it as 6.5? And he's covered that in 7 out of his last 10. I don't know. I'm still a little bit hesitant on this one. But in terms of the matchup, the Knicks allow the 13th fewest assists to power forward. So it's not a difficult matchup by any stretch of the imagination. Right now, it feels too good to be true, right? To take the over. So for me personally, if I was going to play this, it would be over 6.5. Odds aren't available for that right now. But yeah, I'd be definitely leaning the over in this one. You'd be crazy not to because there's no reason I can see an under. But at those odds, it's not something I would be willing to entertain. 6.5, you might have my attention there for some plus money. Looking at his points prop, line's at 20.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. The Knicks allow the 12th most points to power forwards on the season. In terms of head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 3 out of his last 5. Look at his assists in head-to-head matchups, but he has gone under his assist prop in 5 consecutive games against the New York Knicks, just as an FYI. But the Knicks clearly not going to be the same defensive team that he would have faced in the past, given the amount of injuries that they do have. Rebound-wise, his line is 6.5. The New York Knicks allow the fewest rebounds to power forwards on the season. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10 games, and against the Knicks, he's covered them in 2 out of his last 5. So Banchero, I never take a rebound prop for him. He's way too inconsistent. Assists is clearly very consistent for him, and in terms of points, he usually gets close to about 20 points, but again, there's nothing I can really take for Banchero with much confidence. His assist prop obviously looks great looking at the numbers. The matchup isn't too difficult, but I know some other people are probably going to pick Banchero, but I think I just need more than recent form. Like his recent form is amazing, but the line is still at 5.5. The books haven't budged. So, yeah, I'm not overly confident despite his recent form. Looking at Franz Wagner, though, his point line's at 21.5. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10 games. The New York Knicks do allow the 10th most points to small forwards on the season, so he's got a somewhat good matchup. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 1 of his last 4 against the Knicks. Good news if you like the over. That was in his most recent game against them, where he scored 32 points. That 32-point effort, it looks... I was going to go back a little bit further here just to see what we're working with. So, looking at his last 20 games, this is the game against the Knicks. He went through this patch where he's scoring a ton of points. Then he went through a patch where he didn't score a damn thing. Now he's pretty much at a point where he's scoring 30 or he's going under. Look, far too inconsistent for me. The matchup is okay, but again, we don't know the matchups. There could be a blowout risk in this one. So I'm hesitant to take any picks on this game. So I just wanted to be straight up with that one. But let's jump into the next game because I do have a bit of a better feeling about this one. And we're looking at the Miami Heat versus the Philadelphia 76ers. So for Miami, Butler, Richardson, Rozier, they are still out. So they're on a back-to-back. They didn't play today. And for the 76ers, Melton, Lowry, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Covington, and Nicholas Batum, they are all out for the Philadelphia 76ers. So the teams are quite depleted, but I think they still have a few good players that you can probably have a bet on in this game. So first player I do want to look at is Kelly Oubre. So the last time he played, I had a very strong lean to the over. His line for that game was 15.5, finished with 24 against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But let's talk about Kelly Oubre in this one. His points line in this is 18.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The Miami Heat, though, allow the 9th fewest points to small forwards on the season. Head-to-head matchups, he's played them once in a 76ers uniform, and he scored 25 points. That was in the end of December. So quite a strong performance there for Kelly Oubre. For this particular one, I do lean to the over, given the Philadelphia 76ers are somewhat depleted. Maxey, Buddy Hield, Kelly Oubre, I feel like they're going to take the majority of the shots in this game. So Oubre should have the volume. He's definitely going to have the minutes. His last 3 games, he's averaging 40 minutes per game. And he's taking 15.7 shot attempts per game as well. So, look, can he get over 18 points on 15 shots? Might be difficult because he'll need to shoot a very high percentage. His last game, he shot 10 from 14. He shot 71% from the field, and he finished with 24 points. So, yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant to take Kelly Oubre points, but I know that they're a bit depleted, so the opportunities will be there. It just comes down to whether he's going to be the one to take those shots or not. I do want to have a look at Paul Reed. Don't look at him often, and when I do check the box score throughout the day and he's playing, he's managed to do quite well. Firstly, looking at his points, so he is starting now. Last 3 games, he's covered this line. He's covered it in 5 out of his last 10 games. In terms of the matchup, it's a difficult one. Miami allow the 3rd fewest points to centers. But what I wanted to look at was rebounds because for some reason, when I check the box score, he's doing decently. Looking at his last 10, it's not that great. He's hit it in 3 out of his last 10. The Heat allowed the 12th most rebounds to centers. It's an okay matchup, but just his recent form doesn't tell me, take the over with Paul Reed. So we're going to have to give him a pass. I do want to look at Tyrese Maxey. So I had a little bit of a quick look at this before I started recording. What I ultimately landed on was taking the under. He's hit the over 27.5 in 3 out of his last 10 games. He's gone under 7 times. In terms of the matchup, the Miami Heat allow the 6th fewest points to point guards. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in all 3 games against the Miami Heat. So that leans to our favor. The problem is Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid are out, which means he's going to get more opportunities in this. So he's yet to play the Miami Heat with those 2 out of the lineup, but he's played 3 games this season without Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid. He did go under in all 3 games against the Utah Jazz, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I do lean to the under for Tyrese Maxey. I still think the game plan from Miami is going to be to stop Tyrese Maxey, right? He's the focal point for the 76ers offense, the way that their lineup is currently constructed. But I feel like he's still going to take the shots, enough shots to cover this line. Because check this out. The 3 games without Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid, he's averaging 22.7 shot attempts. So in those 3 games, he shot 24, 23, and 21. So he's taken a shitload of shots. Unfortunately for him, he shot 38%, 35%, and 43% from the field in these 3 games. So he didn't shoot a high percentage, but the volume alone is enough to scare me. He's going to shoot the ball more than 20 times. His line's only at 27.5. He could get hot, make a couple of threes, and then your bet is absolutely cooked. So I'm not fading the under. I am leaning the under. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just not. Based off what I'm seeing, I'm not man enough to take an under on Tyrese Maxey today. Looking at his assist prop, though, the line is at 7.5. The matchup is a lot better. The Heat, 17th in the league in assists per game to point guards, which is neither good nor bad, which is what you want to see. You can get the 7.5 at plus money. Now, he's only hit this in 3 out of his last 10 games, and he's gone under in all 3 games against Miami Heat. So, personally, I'm not playing Tyrese Maxey in this one. I do lean to the under purely because I think they're going to have a game plan to try to slow him down. He's not going to stop. He's going to keep shooting. But I feel like someone who probably would benefit with all these outs is someone like Buddy Hield. So hasn't played too many games in a Miami Heat a Philadelphia uniform. But we can see in his last 3 games, he scored 20, 23, and 24 points, which is excellent. In terms of the matchup, the Miami Heat allow the 16th fewest points to shooting guard. So it's neither good nor bad. So I do like that for Buddy Hield. He's yet to play the Miami Heat, obviously, in a 76ers uniform. So the sample size is quite small. So we really have the last few games to really go off. And what we can see, since he's been traded, he's playing heavy minutes, 39, 36, 35. We can see he's taking a lot more shots than he normally would when he was playing for the Indiana Pacers. His shot percentage has been quite high, but based on the outs today, I really do think he can get it done. 17.5 points. I really do like that. The odds, minus 119. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but if we move it to plus 18.5, he still covers it in the same span. You can get that for plus money. So if you've been watching this show for a while, you know I don't like taking odds at like minus 120, 130. I'm not going to celebrate the fact that I got a pick right when the value of those picks aren't really great. So look, Buddy Hield over 18.5. That's something I can fuck around with. I'm just checking my sportsbook right now to see if I can actually take that. So on Bet365 for me, they've got the line set at 17.5. That's not great. So I'm getting that for $1.86. Checking the other sports book, 17.5 as well. So the line hasn't moved and I can't take an alternate right now. What I can look at is 20 points for Buddy Hield. And I'm getting $2.25, which is plus 125. If I look at over 19.5 for this, it's plus 130. So there's probably better odds out there. If I look at Bet365, we check out Buddy Hield. His points milestones, 20 points. There we go. $2.40, which is plus 140. So Bet365, given the juice. Buddy Hield to score 20 or more. I think we're going to fuck around with that. I don't mind it. I think Tyrese Maxey puts up a lot of shots, but he has a difficult time. Buddy Hield, I think the Miami Heat will probably trust themselves to defend him in single coverage. He can create his own shot off the dribble if he really needs to. But the volume right now is great. He's a great shooter. He's been attacking the basket. Give me that. Buddy Hield. I like his points prop in this one. I'm looking at the Miami Heat, though. We've got Duncan Robinson. Let me talk about this for a minute because I'm 90% sure I'm going to take an under on something for Duncan Robinson. So, firstly, his points props at 13.5. The Philadelphia 76ers, they allow the 14th fewest points to shooting guards. He's covered this in 2 straight, 15 against Boston and then 23 against the Milwaukee Bucks. Excellent game. The Miami Heat absolutely destroyed them. Head-to-head matchup, scored 16 in his last game against Philly. He went under in his last 2. So a points prop for Duncan Robinson is not something that I'm willing to take. But what I did want to look through was his assist prop because I think there could be an overreaction to this one. I'm not saying, actually, I lie. It's not an overreaction. I just feel like the line's not right. I think it's a bit too high. So his line's at 3.5, right? The over 3.5, which is 150 minus 150. What I'm looking at is a minus 3.5, which is plus money. And you know how I feel about plus money. I love it. Now, in terms of the Philadelphia defense, they allow the 8th most assists to shooting guards. So Duncan Robinson just got 5 assists in his last game. He's got a somewhat favorable matchup against Philly, who do allow assists to the shooting guard. But Duncan, he's only hit this in 4 out of his last 20 games. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but they had Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier and yada, 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 right? So without Jimmy Butler, he's going to have more opportunity, higher usage rate, and the lot. Looking at the games without Jimmy Butler, he's still gone under in 14 of his last 20 games with Jimmy Butler out of the lineup. I honestly think the number is right. 3.5 is the right place to set the line, but I don't think the odds should be this heavily swayed to the over. So I'm 90% sure I'm taking the under on Duncan Robinson assists plus money. I do love it. The chances of him going back to back with high assist games, it hasn't happened in his last 20 games without Jimmy Butler, and in his last 20 games in general. How many times has he gone back to back over this assist number? None. He hasn't had back to back games with more than 3.5 assists in his last 20. Looking at the season, he's done it twice. So he's had 2 games where he's gone back to back over this assist prop. So I'm willing to take the gamble here, leaning quite heavily on the Duncan side. But check the pin comment at probably an hour after I upload this video, and you will see my final picks. Let's have a look at Bam Adebayo. So his numbers, actually, I'll just show you his numbers, right? His line's at over 22.5. Check out his last 20 games. He's gone under this line, and maybe Outlier will tell us, 15 straight games. So 15 straight games, Adebayo has gone under 22.5 points. The matchup is a good one, though. The 76ers do allow the 5th most points to centers on the season. Head-to-head matchups, went over in his last matchup against Philly, and he went under the 3 prior. So even today, against the Milwaukee Bucks, he had a favorable matchup. The Bucks do give up a lot of points to centers. He had a favorable matchup. Jimmy Butler is out, Richardson's out, Rozier is out. So you would expect him to get some buckets, right? His line was about 22.5 as well. Still went under. So I felt like saying, fuck the matchup with this one, because it doesn't matter with Bam Adebayo. He always finds a way to go under. And look, he did create a lot of offense. He filled up the stat sheet. He just didn't get the points. So he's not the most selfish scorer out there. I feel like we could see a high assist game and a low scoring game. But, does that happen again? I'm not too sure. But I'm not saying to take the under. It's just I've been thinking about taking the under on Bam for quite some time throughout this poor stretch of his. And I'm still thinking about it now. Looking at his assist prop, though, his line for this one's 4.5. It's a little bit juiced, minus 119. 76ers allow the 8th fewest assists to the centers on the season. He has hit this only 2 of his last 10, but he just had 11 assists against the Milwaukee Bucks. In head-to-head matchups, had 5 assists in his last matchup, went under in the last 3. He's just had an 11 assist game. I don't know if he puts that together back-to-back games. So for right now, I'm a bit hesitant to back anything to do with Miami Heat team. I'm actually hesitant to back them almost every single time. Anybody in this Miami Heat team. But Jimmy's not there, so that opens up some opportunities. So lines will move because Jimmy's not there. We'll see if people can step up to the plate. But let's have a look at Tyler Hero. I think he's the most obvious pick that people would look at when you think about Jimmy Butler not being there. He was very similar to... It was a blowout win today, don't get me wrong. But his line shot up to the low to mid-20s. He went under it as well against the Bucks. He scored 19 points. So his line in this one is 21.5. He's playing point guard in this one, but we know that he really is a 2. The matchup is somewhat to the medium to difficult side. He's only covered this line in 2 out of his last 10, but he has covered this in his last 2 games against the Philadelphia 76ers. But the way that both of these teams are constructed is very different to how they were when they last match up. So I wouldn't put too much stock into how he's performed against them in the past. Look, he's on a back-to-back. He didn't play too many minutes against the Milwaukee Bucks, but look, I'm a little bit hesitant to take his points prop. Looking at his assist prop, though, that's at 5.5. You can get that for plus money. But He only had 5 assists in his last matchup. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 10. If we look at his last 10 games without Jimmy Butler and without Terry Rozier, he's covered this in 4 out of his last 10. So it's not really, the numbers aren't convincing with or without Jimmy for Tyler Hero. It's not like he sees the big lifts that you'd expect him to. So, do you look at potentially taking the under in his PRA, right? So his PRA is at 31.5. He's hit this in 2 out of his last 10. So, yeah, you might lean to the under there, and then you take his PRA without Jimmy Butler. And look, he does produce a lot more. He's 5 out of his last 10, but it's not a big enough and consistent enough performance output out of Tyler Hero that would make me want to jump on it. So there's nothing about Tyler Hero's lines that I like in this game. Look, if I'm just looking at this Philadelphia game, leaning the Tyrese Maxey under in points, but my favorite pick is obviously and clearly Buddy Hield over in points. I took him for 20 points so I can get some extra money out of the top of that. If he finishes between 17.5 and 20 points, well, I'm a dickhead and I deserve everything that I get. But this is gambling, right? It's all part of the fun. You got to take the risk, and that's what I'm going to do. The next game, we're looking at the Atlanta Hawks versus Charlotte Hornets. And for the Hawks, Clint Capella's still out and Okongwu is out too. So the Hawks, very thin at the center position. Automatically, I think Nick Richards, could he have a big game here? I also think Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey, big opportunities to get some boards. For the Hornets, Martin is a game-time decision in this one. So let's jump into the key players to see what is what and who is who. DeJounte Murray is who we're going to start with. His points line, it is at 21.5 in this game. He has covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. In terms of the matchup, the Hornets allow the 8th fewest points to shooting guards on the season. DeJounte Murray against the Charlotte Hornets, he's gone under in his last 2 games against them. Covered once of his last 4. So Charlotte Hornets, I don't know. They're giving shooting guards problems, and I don't understand how or why that happened, but it is. So I haven't bet on DeJounte Murray for quite some time on his points prop. He's had this stretch happening for a while. Check out his last 20 games, right? His last 20 games, he's been very consistent. If we look at the season, it's been pretty decent. So it's really the last 20 we're starting to see this new version of DeJounte. And I thought he was preparing for the trade deadline, perhaps, to lift his value. But no, this is just the way that he's playing. He's quite consistent, putting up numbers. I haven't bet on him for quite some time. I've been waiting for a better matchup, and those matchups just don't seem to come in that often. I think there's going to be a stretch over the next couple of weeks where DeJounte Murray has a great matchup. But once again, we have an example where he doesn't have one. So points-wise, I'm not willing to play that. The matchup is a bit difficult. I think there are better options out on the board. He doesn't have the great head-to-head form either. But looking at his as a prop, assist prop, this may something that I can fuck with because there's a few things I like about it. 1, recent form's good. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. 2, the matchup is good. The Hornets allow the 8th most assists to shooting guards, right? 3, this is plus money. So you're getting over 6.5 for plus money, and I love plus money. Bloody beautiful. Head-to-head matchups, he has gone under in all 4 games against the Charlotte Hornets, though. So that makes me a little bit hesitant. The last time they matched up, though, it was a pretty low-scoring game, 116 to 110. I doubt that will happen. These 2 teams combined, they combined for almost 240 points per game. So I think there'll be more points and more scoring opportunities. So I'm actually not worried about that. He got 6 assists in a low-scoring game. And this game was last season. The rest were last season. So I think they've only matched up once, or DeJounte's only played once. So it's just prop. Definitely a strong lean for me. I do like that for DeJounte Murray. Looking at his rebound prop, his line's at 5.5. That's also plus money. The Hornets allow the 12th most rebounds to shooting guards. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. So the numbers aren't as strong. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Charlotte Hornets. So on DeJounte Murray, assists, probably my favorite prop from him. Points, he's somewhat consistent. I wouldn't take him to cover his line, but maybe if you look at 15 points for a parlay, maybe DeJounte Murray, I can fuck with that. Let's have a look at his running mate, Trae Young. Now, his points line is 23.5. The Charlotte Hornets allow the 13th fewest points to point guards on the season. And for a team that gives up a lot of points, they actually slow point guards down quite well. Looking in his last 10 games, Trae's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. So that's good. Head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 5 against the Hornets, which is good. He scored 23 points in that last game they played each other, but again, that was a low-scoring game. He played 36 minutes. He attempted 19 shots. He shot 4 for 19 against the Charlotte Hornets the last time they played and still finished with 23 points. So if we think about the law of averages, we can see he's never shot that low in his last 5 games. He still shot pretty poorly, though, I must be honest. 36% on average. His highest game was 44%. But if we want to look at his last 10 games, Trae Young, he's shooting at an average of 46%. His very last game against the Bulls, he shot 21% from the field. And I think it's quite rare that he's going to shoot that poorly in back-to-back games. So for Trae Young, my lean is the over for his points. I think that line of 23.5 is a little bit too low. So most definitely it's a lean to the over. If you look at his assist prop, though, the line is at 10.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10 games. The Charlotte Hornets rank 17th in assists allowed. It's not a good matchup or a bad one. Looking at his head-to-head form, he's covered this in only 2 out of his last 5. So our last game, we took Trae over 10.5 assists. He delivered quite well. He finished on 14 assists against the Bulls. With the Hornets, I'm a bit hesitant to take him on that one. I just get this feeling he's probably going to go over in points, under in assists. That's just what my gut tells me right now. But look, I'll get back to that. I haven't made a full, complete decision on Trae Young just yet. Looking at Saddiq Bey, we'll check out his points and his rebounds. They're the main things that he delivers on. Saddiq, in terms of the matchup, he's got a great matchup today. The Hornets allow the most points to small forwards on the season. He did score 15 points in his last game against them. Remember, low-scoring game, so he might have more opportunities. He only played 28 minutes, and he shot the ball 12 times. They're very important stats to remember, because looking at his last 10, he's playing 33 minutes on average, which is more, and he's attempting on average 12 attempts per game, which is more, right? So he's playing more minutes, taking more shots in his last 10 games in comparison to his last game against the Charlotte Hornets, where he still covered this line. So his line's at 14.5. He's covered this in 8 out of his last 10. So Saddiq Bey, I do like the over for Saddiq Bey. I'm just calling it out right now. If you want to dive a little bit further, it is a road game. Checking Saddiq Bey's last 10 road games, he's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. Now that makes me a little bit hesitant. But that last game against the Charlotte Hornets was a road game too. So that's really put things at ease for me. But I do like Saddiq Bey's over in points. I haven't put the bet on, but I'm just telling you what I like. Rebound-wise, the line's at 6.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. The Charlotte Hornets allow the 9th most rebounds to small forwards in head-to-head matchups. Saddiq Bey's gone under in both of these. Now, the Atlanta Hawks, like I said earlier, Capella and Okongwu were both missing. They're their best rebounders outside of Jalen Johnson. I think there's a chance Saddiq Bey picks up more boards in this game. Looking at his matchup, though, he could see Brandon Miller a bit more often. Brandon Miller's a pretty good shooter, so he might take Saddiq Bey out of position to rebound. So, yeah, rebounds I'm a little bit hesitant. Saddiq Bey points, something I can probably fuck with. But let's have a look at Jalen Johnson. So I like Jalen Johnson on the offensive side, and I hate him on the defensive side of things. So when we get to Miles Bridges, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So his points line is at 15.5. He's covered this in 7 out of his last 10. Charlotte Hornets allow the 13th fewest points to power forwards. In his head-to-head matchups, he did score 21 points in his last game against them, and that was a low-scoring game. In that game, he played 29 minutes. He attempted 13 shots, and he made 9 of them. So a fairly efficient night for Jalen Johnson. In his last 10 games, he's averaging 13 shots per game. So the volume is there. He's shooting 51%. So let's say he hits 6 or 7 shots. If he's making 6 or 7 shots, yeah, he might get close to this number. So I think the line is just about right. So I'm not going to take his points line with any confidence at all. So, but looking at his other props, so we've won a fair few bets just betting his assists. Now, what's crazy to me is we see his assist prop. It's 2.5 right now, but it's minus 165. This has been at 3.5 for quite some time. So looking at the 2.5, he's covered this in 9 out of his last 10, which isn't very convincing. He had 2 assists in his last matchup against the Hornets, but over his last 10 games, he's definitely been racking up a lot more assists, is what I'll say. If we look at 3.5, you get that for plus 140. He's hit that in 6 out of his last 10. The matchup is okay. The Hornets allow the 10th most assists to power forwards in the season. Yeah, look at that. I'm still a little bit hesitant on Jalen Johnson. They're starting to get a little bit sharper with him because Jalen Johnson is one of the most popular people you can bet on. He's young. He gets stats in every single category. He can shoot, dunk. He can do the lot, right? Pass, rebound. So very popular player to bet on. When players become popular, the books become more sharper in those areas. So rebounds, though, his line's at 9.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The Hornets allow the 5th fewest rebounds to power forwards. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in every single game against the Charlotte Hornets. Now, I'm telling you, I don't know who it's going to be, but someone from Atlanta is going to rack up a fucking shit ton of rebounds, and we're going to be like, oh, we should have took that bet. Saddiq Bey, Jalen Johnson, the matchup is difficult, and they haven't really got it done in the past. But I think one of them is the ones who are going to do it. Fernando's obviously going to have a somewhat strong rebounding game, but we don't have much form to go off. I don't think he's played starter minutes for a very long time. I'm just checking to see. He doesn't even have a prop available right now. So I feel like one of those guys will probably do a very great job on the boards, but I don't know who it's going to be. Let's jump into the Charlotte Hornets players, though, because Nick Richards is someone who probably will have a strong rebounding game. He could take advantage of the lineup. Rebound-wise, his line's at 8.5. He did go under in his last 2 games against the Hawks, went over the 2 games prior to that. The 2 games he went over, he played 20-plus minutes. Looking at his last 10 games, he's covered this line in 6 out of his last 10. The Hawks, mid-tier when it comes to rebounds allowed to centers, but as I said, they're missing 2 key players in that position. In his last 10 games, he's playing 30 minutes a night. So 30 minutes a night, 9 rebounds as an average. His line's at 8.5. So I think Nick Richards could get it done. But we're seeing lots of odds of minus 120. So that doesn't get me too aroused. That makes me a little bit hesitant. But the 2 guys I do want to look at are Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges. And over the past few days, I've taken the under on both of these players. When the matchup is right, I'll take the over on both of them because based on how this team is currently constructed, these guys should be taking a whole lot of shots. So Brandon Miller will start with. His points prop is at 19.5. In terms of the matchup, the Atlanta Hawks, they actually allow the most points in the league. In terms of shooting guards, they allow the 10th most points in the league. In Brandon Miller's last 10 games, he's covered this in 6 out of his last 10. He's gone under in 3 straight games. Head-to-head matchups, he did score 13 points in his last matchup against the Atlanta Hawks, but it's a very different team now, right? He'll get more opportunity. Despite all the trades that the Charlotte Hornets have made, Brandon Miller, he's seeing less minutes and he's seeing less shot attempts. So I'm not willing to take a bet on Brandon Miller because of that reason. The trades have happened and you thought he was going to get a big bump in his usage rate in minutes, and we're seeing the opposite. Less minutes, less opportunities, less shots. So, yeah, Brandon Miller, I'm a little bit unsure of. Miles Bridges, I haven't checked the lines and numbers with this, but I am leaning the over already. And let me explain. So, line at 25.5, he's only covered in 3 out of his last 10. In terms of matchups, the Atlanta Hawks allow the 2nd most points to power forwards. Now, because of how many times I've bet on Jalen Johnson and other Atlanta Hawks players, I've had the privilege of watching Jalen Johnson play defense. And despite his size and his athleticism, he is soft inside. Like, you can just drive it at him, bump him a little bit, and he's not going to contest your shot. So if he does pick up Miles Bridges, it could be him or Saddiq Bey. I think Bridges can really take advantage of the matchup here. So even though he's only hit this line in 3 out of his last 10, I just got a feeling that Miles Bridges can get it done. And I haven't even checked the numbers. That's just what my gut says. That's what I feel inside my belly. Bridges hasn't played the Charlotte Hornets since he's come back from his suspension. But, yeah, my gut tells me he's going over. Look, he had an easy matchup against the Indiana Pacers. He only scored 20 points in that game. Filled the stat sheet up. He played 38 minutes, and he took 17 shots. So, similar to Brandon Miller, once the trades have gone down, we've seen a reduction in shots taken from Bridges as well while we get everybody acquainted. But I think it just makes too much sense for me not to take Bridges, right? Because the Hawks, they're going to be missing some rim protection. They're going to be missing rebounding. Jalen Johnson is not a good defender at his position. There could be a real up and down game. I think the Hawks will defend the perimeter quite well, but it's those guys attacking the rack. Miles Bridges, definitely something that I'm considering. The other thing I would look at is possibly his assists. So he had 7 assists in his last matchup, 5 against the Grizzlies. These are 3 games since the trades have happened. The matchup is good. His line's at 4.5, and you can get it at plus money if you take the over. So that's definitely one that I'm looking at. And look, I'm just going to check out his rebounds right now. If the rebounds check out too, we might be looking at a PRA play here. But sometimes, well, a lot of the times, his rebound line is very high. So his line's at 7.5. Again, the matchup is great. The Hawks allow the second most rebounds to power forwards, and he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10 games. Having a look at his PRA. Let's just do it. Let's have a look at the PRA because I feel like Bridges has a big game here. He's only covered this in 3 out of his last 10. The matchup for points, rebounds, and assists, you can't get better than that. It's an excellent matchup. Looking at teams where he would have seen, I guess, a similar type of matchup in his last 10 games, Indiana is an easy matchup, but he went under in both of those. The games where he went over, Raptors, Lakers, and Chicago Bulls, they were actually more on the difficult side. Actually, the Bulls is an easy matchup. The Lakers and the Raptors is an easy matchup for Miles Bridges. Yeah, but look, given the form, I'm hesitant, but if we're just not looking at data and you're just thinking about gut feel, I'm really thinking the over for Miles Bridges. Looking at Trey Mann, now he's only played a few games for the Charlotte Hornets, these 3 games here. And in those games, 11, 9, and 11 points. In terms of the matchup, the Hawks do allow the most points, not the moist, the most points to point guards. Therefore, we see a line a little bit over than what he's been averaging. In these 3 games, he has played more minutes in each game, which is positive. In terms of his field goal attempts, he's taken 11 shots in his last 2 games. He hasn't shot well from deep, though. 3-point percentage has been quite poor. So I would lean to the under if I was going to, but I would want to see more data. In terms of assists, though, this one's pretty crazy. He's hit this in his last 2. So 7 assists against the Pacers, 9 against the Grizzlies. Both the Grizzlies and the Pacers, they allow fuck all assists to point guard. So the fact that he was able to do that in a difficult matchup gives me reason to believe that the over is going to be a great play here. In terms of the matchup, the Atlanta Hawks allow the 3rd most assists to point guards. So if Trey Mann is going to get 30-plus minutes against this Atlanta Hawks team with no bigs, I don't know how well this guy can play in the pick and roll, but I really want to watch film to see how he's made this assist. But what I'm going to do is after this video is done, before I make my pick on Trey Mann to go over his assist, I'm going to watch film in these last 2 games. I'm going to figure out exactly how is he making these assists. And if by the looks of it, he is creating and facilitating the way a proper point guard should, I'm taking the over. And I'm probably going to move the line. I'm going to take an over 6.5 assists. So I'll probably take him for 7 assists and chase that plus money because I feel like he's probably not going to get on the hook on this one. I've got a feeling he's going to jam it. But I just need to do some research and look at some video for that first. But yeah, definitely Trey Mann, one to watch. So keep a lookout for that in the pinned comments. We're looking at the Chicago Bulls versus the Cleveland Cavaliers next. And in terms of the matchup, Alex Caruso, he's a game time decision in this one. And the main one, in fact, outside of that, all the key players are playing in this game. Let's have a look at the Cleveland Cavaliers players first. Darius Garland's the first one. His point line's at 16.5. He finally had a strong scoring game, 21 points against the 76ers. In terms of the matchup, the Bulls allow the least points to point guards on the season. So a difficult matchup for Darius Garland in this one. Despite that, he's covered this line in his last matchup against the Bulls. He scored 19 points in a low-scoring game. So, yeah, I'm still hesitant to bet on Darius Garland. I'll just say that right off the top. Oh, that was louder than I wanted it to be. Looking at his assist prop, though, last 10 games. His line's at 6.5. He's covered this in 3 straight. The Bulls allow the 12th fewest assists to point guards. He's been doing it quite well lately, but what we know is Philly probably mid in terms of assists allowed, but their lineup isn't completely healthy. The Raptors and the Nets, they give up assists to point guard. So an easier matchup he's had over the last 3. But I do like that this 6.5 line, you can get it plus money. The matchup will be somewhat difficult. The Bulls are a very slow team in terms of pace. And the Cavs, they're a very good defensive team. So it could be on a lower end in terms of scoring. So taking a Darius Garland prop, that doesn't interest me right now. One thing that I am sitting on the fence about is an Evan Mobley prop because I do like his points and I do like his rebounds in this one. His points first. His line's at 13.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10, but he's hit it in 4 straight. He's come back from injury not too long ago at the start of the month, I believe. and his minutes are slowly creeping upwards, which is real positive. Let me show you that. Yep. So his minutes are slowly on the incline. He's hit this in 4 consecutive games, and he's hit this in his last 2 games against the Chicago Bulls. And in terms of the matchup, the Bulls are now the 5th most points. So everything is really starting to align. Minutes are up. He's got the good matchup. He's hit it against him in the past. His recent form is fucking banging. So Evan Mobley, points prop, I do like, but I am leaning on it. Rebounds prop, I do like this one too because the Bulls allow the most rebounds to power forwards in the season. I also like it because if you take the 9.5, you get it for plus money, which is perfect. It's exactly what I want. His recent form is great. 6 out of his last 10, he's really banged on, so that checks out for me. But his last 2 head-to-head matchups, he's not even gotten close. So I understand that this was quite some time ago, so I'm not going to put too much stock into that. But yeah, last season he wasn't the same rebounder here as this season, so I get it. So this one I'm leaning to the over as well. I'm also considering, do I just take points and rebounds? Because I do like them both. He's hit his points and rebound prop in 6 consecutive games, and the matchup for points and rebounds is terrific. So I'm on the fence on Evan Mobley. It's more so about which prop do I take. Like, I'm going to bet on him. Which prop, I don't know. So keep an eye on the pinned comment. And if you've watched the video and there's no pinned comment yet, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Who else is there from this team? Donovan Mitchell, D. Mitch, looking at his line at 26.5 points. In terms of the matchup, the Bulls allow the 7th fewest points to shooting guards. That doesn't matter to Donovan Mitchell. He says, fuck your matchup. He's gone over in 4 out of his last 5. And remember, he had that 71-point game against the Chicago Bulls. In his last 10 games, he's hit this in 8 out of his last 10 games. So the man is absolutely buzzing. Now, Donovan Mitchell, excellent player. I've just never really bet on him, to be honest. He just doesn't tickle my fancy. Like, the numbers check out. Sometimes I find it difficult to buy into him. Sometimes I feel like he's similar to Jason Tatum. He doesn't take the best shots, but look, his form is undeniable. His form is great, and he's got it done against the Bulls many times before. The matchup is difficult, but Donovan Mitchell doesn't give a fuck about that. So, yeah, I'm definitely leaning to the over for Donovan Mitchell in this one. I just haven't placed a bet on him yet. Looking at his assist prop, though, let's check that one out. Line's at 5.5. He's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. Bulls allow the 12th fewest assist. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in every single game against the Bulls. So Donovan Mitchell loves playing against the Bulls, right? So points, good. Assists are good. Let's just check his rebound prop. And if this one's full of fucking green lights, we might be looking at a PRA here, boys. All right. Line's 4.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The Bulls allow the 4th fewest rebounds to shooting guards. About to click his head-to-head, and I hope this all isn't green. Okay. Not all of it is, but shit, he's had some good games. 3 out of his last 5, he's covered. All right. Let's quickly check his PRA and see what the fuck type of beast we're dealing with here. So Donovan Mitchell, points, rebounds, and assists. His line's at 36.5. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 5 games against the Chicago Bulls. And in his last 10 games, he's covered it in 6 of them. Having a quick squiz through at what's pulling him back, I think it is the rebound side of thing, really. So let's have a look at his points and assists. Points and assists, he's covered in 8 out of his last 10 games. That's pretty horny. In head-to-head matchups, 4 out of his last 5 as well. So points and assists, somewhat difficult matchup, but it hasn't really mattered to Donovan Mitchell before. I do like that. I just, at 119, would I play it? I'm not too sure. So look, the form's great. If you want to take your bets purely based on form, go for your life, my friend. Let's have a look at Jared Allen. His points props at 16.5. He's covered this in 3 out of his last 6 games against them. In his last 10 games, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. And looking at the matchup, the Bulls are the 10th fewest points to center. So Jared Allen at 16.5. Like, I did take him for this point prop not too long ago, but what I found is difficult matchups have obviously been difficult for Jared Allen. So Memphis, difficult. Detroit's difficult. Washington is an easy one. And the Brooklyn Nets, that's a difficult matchup for centers too. It's an easy matchup, the Raptors. Philadelphia without Joel Embiid. The Sacramento Kings, that's actually a difficult matchup. So surprised he's did well there. But I was also surprised that they beat the Kings by 16 points. The Spurs is an easy matchup. The Clippers is a hard matchup. Zubac was injured. And the Bucks are an easy matchup. So Jared Allen, I rarely play him at 16.5. And if I would, it's because he has an easy matchup. So I'm not saying to take the under. I'm just a bit too cautious to take that. Rebound prop, his line's at 11.5. The Bulls allow the 7th fewest rebounds to centers. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. And in his last 6 games against the Bulls, he's hit this twice. So he did hit in his last 2 games. But I have a feeling in these games, my man Evan Mobley didn't play. Let me just double check that real quick. Evan Mobley, and I couldn't be more wrong. Evan Mobley played both of those games, and Jared Allen absolutely fucking smashed those rebounds. So if I could kick myself on camera and not feel the pain, I would. But I'm just letting you know I'm doing that in my head right now. So Jared Allen, rebound-wise, I'm still a bit uncertain. Very similar to his points prop. I feel like his lines are pretty sharp. They're spot on. So not real aroused by that one. Looking at the Bulls players, we'll have a look at Kobe White because he can do it all. Firstly, his point props at 20.5. He's gone under in 6 straight games against the Cavs. That's the first call out. In his last 10, he's hit this 5 times. So half the time he goes over. Cavs allow the 8th fewest points to point guards. So the matchup is somewhat difficult. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 5.5. The Cavs allow the fewest assists to point guards. Kobe White, though, has hit this in 8 out of his last 10. So great form against this line, but the matchup is the hardest one he's going to face. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 1 out of his last 6. So a lot of that makes me hesitant as well. Looking at his rebounds, his prop here is at 3.5. I feel like that's quite low, but yeah, it's juiced at 145. The Cavs allow the 5th fewest rebounds to point guards on the season. So he's hit this in 9 out of his last 10. Check this out real quick. He's hit this in 18 out of his last 20 games. So I feel like this rebound prop for Kobe White, probably good for your parlays, perhaps. I wouldn't play this on its own at 145. In this type of game where I like a lot of the props, but I'm not confident enough to just bang money on the single prop. These are the ones where I tend to do a same game parlay where there's multiple plays that I think are okay. Peel them back a little bit and play it a little bit safer. So that's what we might see in this game. And Kobe White rebounds could be one of them. So Kobe White rebounds, there could be some Evan Mobley shit in there. And there could be some Donovan Mitchell points really in there. So that's what I'm thinking at the minute. Who else is there? DeMar DeRozan. I'm going to go through this one so fast. I fucking hate this guy. He seems to kill me every time I bet on him. So points prop, 21.5. He's hit this in 5 consecutive games. My Lord. The matchup, obviously a difficult one. Every matchup with the Cavs has a challenge with it, but he's hit it in 5 of his last 5 games. Head-to-head, he's only hit this in 1 of 6. So he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Cavs, right? So that automatically tells me I don't give a fuck about how good you've been playing recently. If a certain team's got your number, I'm not going to bet on you. You might hit it, but I've learned over time it's not worth the risk. In terms of assists, the line's at 4.5. He's hit it in 6 out of his last 10, and he's covered this in 2 out of his last 6 against the Cavs. Very similar to the points. No confidence. Rebounds, line's at 3.5. He did cover in his last 2 against the Cavs, which is good. And in his last 10, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. So, no, I'm not a fan. Don't like any of the DeRozan props. The last one I do want to look at is Vucevic. Now, Vooch, his props at 18.5. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10. He's hit this in 6 consecutive games, which is absolutely cray-cray. In terms of the matchup, the Cavs allow the 6th fewest points to centers on the season. Nikola Vucevic, in head-to-head matchups, has hit this in only 2 out of his last 6 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So very much the same as DeRozan, where we can say, yeah, your recent form is fucking elite, but you've struggled against this team in the past. So I'm just trying to look through the teams he's versed. Atlanta are soft inside. Orlando, a good rebounding team, but they allow a lot of points to centers. Memphis don't even have a center at the moment. Timberwolves, that's a difficult matchup. And the Bulls actually won in that game in an upset. So he had a strong game there. The Kings, that's a difficult matchup to score when it comes to centers. And the Hornets, that's an easy matchup. So, yeah, look, Vucevic has been playing well. I won't take that away from him. But I'm not feeling confident to bet on him in this one. Looking at his rebounds prop, that line is at 9.5. The matchup is mid. And he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. And looking at head-to-head matchups, shit, my man's rebounded well against the Cavs. He's covered this in 5 consecutive games. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Well, I'm not saying to do this, but this is what I'm thinking of doing. Looking at just on how he's played against the Cleveland Cavaliers, he's had a double-double in 5 consecutive games. So what that tells me is, it doesn't matter how well or how shitty he is when it comes to scoring the points, he'll score more than 10 points in this game, but you'll get bugger all odds for it. So the rebounds prop, I think that's somewhat decent. He's done very well against the Cavs. The matchup is good in terms of the Cavs don't give much of anything to anyone. This one looks pretty decent. So Vucevic rebounds, but I thought when it comes to building that multi, I might take parlay Vucevic for 8 boards. We might take Mobley for 8 boards, perhaps. Kobe White for 4 rebounds. Shit, a lot of rebounds. These guys better miss a lot of shots. I'm thinking about that. And then maybe we take Donovan Mitchell for points, something like that. That's what I'm thinking at the moment. So, look, at the end of the day, just check that pin comment, and that's where it will all be. Pumping the brakes real quick on this one. I do hope you guys are loving the preview. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to join something that's actually closing soon. So for those of you who've been watching these videos for quite some time, earlier in the season, I was partnering up with Tips of Tea. Is one of the best NBA bettors that I have ever seen in a very short lifetime of mine, but one of the absolute best. Now, he's selling his service. He's selling his picks, really, right? And the reason why I'm announcing this is because that's actually closing to the public on the 19th of February. So there's just a couple of days left to sign up. It is 249 Australian dollars if you're interested in signing up for that. I do have a link to join that in the description box below. And anybody who clicks on that link is going to get a free look over the next 3 days. He also has a profit guarantee. If he doesn't generate profit, and he's got a certain date that he's sticking to, but if he doesn't generate enough profit, if he doesn't hit that target and generate profit by a certain date for you, if you do sign up, he's going to refund the whole thing back to you. He's never made guarantees before, so he must be feeling really confident about this one. Some few key stats. Since 2020, and I'll pop this up on the screen, he's actually generated almost 1,600 units of profit on the NBA alone. If you want to see more recently how things are looking, in January 2024, 175 units profit he's created. Now, I personally have been tailing his picks for quite some time, and I wouldn't promote this if I didn't believe in the work that was being done. I have generated a large portion of my profit from his picks alone. So the best part about this is the 2 things. 1, you're going to get a free look for 3 days anyway if you join up using that link. 2, you're going to get a profit guarantee, meaning if he doesn't generate profit by a certain date for you, he's going to give you a full refund of whatever you pay to him. Once again, this is completely optional. The one word of advice I can give to you, if you don't currently follow a unit staking method and you don't have discipline and bankroll management, this is not for you. But if you are somebody who takes your sports betting serious and you're doing this to generate profit and you have discipline, you understand units and bankroll management, Tips of Tea, he can definitely deliver on that front. So I'll leave the link for that in the description box below. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Let's get straight back into the preview. We're kicking it off with the Brooklyn Nets versus the Boston Celtics. So these guys just played each other. So these can be difficult at times because just because one player plays a certain way in the one game doesn't mean that they'll back it up and do the same thing in the next. But we'll do our best predicting this one. So let's have a look at Jaylen Brown firstly. His points prop is at 22.5. Real quick look at the matchups and see who's in or out. Porzingis is out. Ben Simmons and Cam Johnson are all out for this game. So looking at Jaylen Brown, his points line's at 22.5. He had historic form against the Nets, and it was excellent. And he went under in his points prop. And I mentioned this in my video yesterday, that this guy's recent form is ass. It is poo. It is shit. It sucks. I took his over in the first quarter. That didn't cash either. So Jaylen Brown breaking my heart. So I don't like his points prop right now. He probably scores 40 tonight. But one thing I wanted to look at real quick was how well has he played with Kristaps Porzingis out of the lineup. We can see he's hit that in 5 out of his last 10 games without Porzingis. So Porzingis didn't play today against the Nets. So, yeah, I still can't take Jaylen Brown's points with any confidence. Regardless, the matchup is great. 3rd most points to small forwards in the league. Jaylen Brown still sucks. Looking at his boards, though, lines at 5.5. Got the best matchup you can think of. And then the Nets allow the most rebounds to small forwards. Jaylen Brown in his last matchup against Brooklyn only finished on 1. So even though his recent form was great, what I remember about the video last night, he hasn't rebounded well against the Nets. And I was right. So what is this telling me? Some players' historical form matters more than their recent form is what I'm calling out. When I make a lot of these picks on this video, I try to look where all the stars align. Matchup is good. Recent form is good. Form against the opponent is good. In terms of matchups, minutes, opportunities, those will be presented. Jaylen Brown struggles in the matchup against the Nets, and that's what we've seen with his rebounds prop. Points prop, he's had a shit recent form. Form against him in the past has been great, and he still sucked anyway. So Jaylen Brown, I don't believe in ban lists, by the way. I see a lot of people put up ban lists and all this. I ain't into all that. Like, you as the sports bettor has to make the right decision. Sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision. You're going to pick a play to go over, and they won't. And sometimes it's the adverse, right? You pick a play to go under, and they go over. At the end of the day, you made that decision. You can't blame the player. So all I'm saying is I'm not touching Jaylen Brown until we see an uplift in his form and confidence or whatever the hell he's missing. It just needs to get better. Jrue Holiday, his points prop is at 13.5 points. In terms of the matchup, the Brooklyn Nets, they allow the 6th most points to point guards. He just scored 14 points against them. But I think his line in this last game was 13.5 or 14.5. Either way, it was real close. He has covered in 7 out of his last 10. 35 minutes per game. Shot the ball 10 times, shot 60% from the field. Now, at this line, you're probably looking at something similar. I wouldn't bet the over despite him being hitting it recently. It is a home game, so let's quickly just check how he performs at home. Last 10 games at home, he's covered in only 4 out of his last 10. So, yeah, I wouldn't bet the over for Jrue Holiday, but I'm not saying to take the under, despite the matchup and the history. Looking at his rebounds and assists, he's been doing quite well in that one lately. His rebound line is at 5.5, though, so that's moved. It's plus money, but it's moved. Matchup, it's not the greatest or the worst. And in head-to-heads, he only had 5 boards against the Nets prior to that, rebounding like an absolute fucking menace. Looking at his assist prop, lines at 4.5. He'd had 12 assists in that last game against the Nets. Prior to that, he had great historical form. The Nets allow the 6th fewest assists to point guards. And looking at his last 10, he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. So he just had a stellar game passing the ball. I question whether he can do it again because that's clearly an outlier. I wouldn't make a decision based on that game. Who knows? The Nets might switch shit up and say, you know what? In this game, we're limiting Jrue Holiday's assists. Let's turn him into a scorer, right? So that is a realistic chance that could happen. So that's what makes these types of games a little bit difficult. So for me, I'm choosing not to touch Jrue Holiday in this one, but he's going to have a good game. That's somewhere along the lines, points or assists. I feel like they'll turn him into a scorer because it makes sense. You prefer to see Jrue Holiday score over someone like Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, right? Speaking of Jason Tatum, points prop, his line's at 29.5. He just scored 41 points against the Nets. Killed it. The matchup was supposed to be the hardest one on paper. The Nets allow the fewest points to power forwards on the season, and Jason Tatum said, fuck your matchup, take these buckets, scoring 41 points. Prior head-to-head matchups, he'd been up and down, right? Looking at his form lines, I would never take a bet on Jason Tatum. He's up and down, There's no great form. Realistically, if I had to, I don't even remember saying this, but looking at the video from last night, I probably would have said lean to the under, or I would have said, I don't know what the fuck this guy's going to do. So you might need to fact check me on that. And looking at his point prop today, it's the same thing that applies. I don't know what the fuck Jason Tatum's going to do. 29.5. He goes under it more than he goes over it. So I'd lean that way. But yeah, I can't get a read of this. But one thing I will play on Jason Tatum, what I do like is his rebounds. I was going to play his rebound prop in the last game. I was 50-50 on it. This one, I'm ready to take it. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. The line is still at 8.5. Matchup-wise, 12th fewest rebounds to power forward, so it's not good nor bad. He just had 14 rebounds against the Nets, which I love. And it's not just the recent matchup is why I'd be taking this game. Historically, he's hit this now in 7 consecutive games against the Brooklyn Nets. He's covered this line every single time. And what I love about this, you're getting minus 104 odds. So the odds are excellent for a line that he's covered 100% of time against his team and that he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. In fact, he's hit this in 4 consecutive games in a row. So I love this pick for Jason Tatum. I've already placed my bet. Up to you whether you choose to follow, but I do like that. Looking at his assists, lines at 4.5. He has covered this quite well, but the 4.5 is juice to the gills, so I wouldn't even touch that. You could look at, you know, rebounds and assists for him, but I do like his rebound prop at the odds that we're getting it. In head-to-head matchups, he does hit this at only 3 of his last 7. So assist-wise for Tatum, I'm still not willing to take it in this particular game, being a back-to-back against the same team. Rebounds I can fuck with, points and assists, I don't know what the man's going to do. Now, we're taking a look into some of the boys from the Brooklyn Nets. I'm starting off with Mikal Bridges. His points line's at 21.5 in this game. We can see in his last 10 games, he's covered this line in 5 out of his last... Oh, shit, excuse me. 5 out of his last 10. In terms of the matchup, neither good nor bad. He scored 27 points in that last game against Boston. They are on the road this time, though, so he has hit this in 2 out of his last 4. Having a quick look at his road form, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 10 road games. So I typically don't bet on Michael Bridges for anything, right? Because very similar to some of the players we've gone through tonight, very inconsistent, very up and down. Even if the matchup is great, they tend to shit it, and that's not the type of player that I'm looking to bet on. So we'll have a quick look at his assists, but then we'll fucking jump into some other players because he's not getting me aroused. This looks great. His assist line, he's covered that in 6 consecutive games, which is great. But the line for this is at minus 148, so it's quite juiced. If I was going to play this, it would have to be at 3.5. But then if you look at 3.5, he hasn't hit this quite well at all as of late. Against the Boston Celtics, he's gone over 3.5 twice, under it twice, right? The matchup, somewhat decent. But yeah, Bridges, I'm feeling you, my boy. Who else is there? Nick Claxton. Let's check Uncle Nick out. His points props at 11.5. The Boston Celtics, ranked 16th in points allowed to centers. Looking at his last 10, he's hit this in his last 5. 5 out of his last 10, my apologies. Only scored 10 points against the Boston Celtics. That game extends his streak of going under this line to 5 consecutive games. So hasn't performed well against them. The line's only at 11.5. It's one extra shot that he needs to make based off his last game. But again, I'm not willing to take the under. I'm not willing to take the over for Nick Claxton. Looking at his boards, his line's at 9.5. The Celtics allow the second fewest rebounds to centers. He only had 8 rebounds in that last game. And in head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 2 out of his last 5. So, yeah, look, I'm not feeling too much in this game at all. Jason Tatum rebounds I like. Jaylen Brown I don't like at all. Drew Holiday I'm a little bit skeptical about after his great assist game. Points or assists, one of those I think he explodes in. I just don't have a good read on it right now. So, yeah, rebounds for Tatum, but that'll be it for that particular game. Looking at the Pacers versus the Raptors, though. So let's jump straight into this one. Having a quick look at the lineups to see if anybody's in, who's out, who's game time. And as per usual, Tyrese Halliburton, game time decision. But so is RJ Barrett and Benedict Mathurin. So some key players from both sides. But let's have a look to see what's on the board. Let's look at Gary Trent Jr. We don't look at his points. I wouldn't feel confident playing him on anything else. Line in this one, 10.5. He's gone under in 3 consecutive games. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. And in terms of matchup, it's a pretty decent one. The Indiana Pacers allow the 10th most points to shooting guards on the season. In head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 1 of his last 3 against the Pacers. So Gary Trent Jr., I'm not feeling you, my boy. Scotty Barnes. Now, I haven't liked betting on Scotty Barnes since the Siakam trade went down, but let's have a look anyway. His line's at 22.5. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10. So that's not good. He does have a great matchup. The Pacers allow the 3rd most points to power forwards on the season. But looking at his head-to-head matchups against the Pacers, he's hit this in 1 out of his last 3. Matchup, always been easy against the Pacers, hasn't always delivered, right? So points-wise for Scotty Barnes, I don't think I'll play a Scotty Barnes points prop all year until I find some consistency. He's at that stage in his career, he's trying to decide, am I a facilitator, scorer? Like he can do so much, but that also makes him quite inconsistent if you're looking at one particular prop. In terms of assist, his line for this one is 7.5, which is fucking high, but it's plus money, plus 100. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, 3 consecutive games. The matchup is difficult. The Pacers allow the 8th fewest assists to power forwards, and Scotty Barnes has only hit this in 1 of his last 3. So I don't like that. Rebounds, I don't even have to look at the numbers. I can tell you I don't like it. He's hit it in 3 straight against the Pacers, which is good. But looking at his last 10, 3 out of his last 10, but he has hit it in 3 straight. The matchup is pretty good. Pacers allow the 10th most rebounds to power forwards. But is 3 games enough to change my mind about Scotty? If we look at his last 20, we can see he's done fuck all when it comes to rebounds. And then in his last 3 games, suddenly he's an absolute monster. So until I see a bigger patch of consistency, then I might be willing to take Scotty. If I was going to take a Scotty prop, it would be an over on rebounds. But given the number of games that are on today, I think we can find something a little bit better. Let's have a look at Tyrese Halliburton. We'll check out his points and his assists. Firstly, his points prop, it's at 21.5. In terms of the matchup, the Raptors allow the 3rd fewest points to point guards on the season. In his last 10 games, he's hit this once. So the matchup is difficult, is what I would say, in terms of scoring. He's only hit this 1 out of his last 10. Looking at his minutes, he's back playing 34 minutes per game. So that minutes restriction is truly well and gone. He'll take more shots provided he plays more minutes. And he scored 33 in his last game against the Raptors. That 263 points were scored in that game. So, look, I'm a bit hesitant. The matchup's difficult. He's done it before, but he's now playing more minutes. So you can't really take too much of this recent form into account because he was only playing 20 to 25 minutes. So, in terms of his assists, the line for that is 11.5. And this is where the matchup is great. The Raptors allow the 4th most assists to point guards on the season. He's only hit this in 3 out of his last 10, but keep in mind, reduced minutes, right? Head-to-head matchups, he's hit this in 2 out of his last 3 games against the Raptors. Excellent assist form. So if I am going to bet on Halliburton, assist will definitely be the way that I go. Checking out Miles Turner in this one. We'll just check out his points prop because his rebounds and assists are ass. Looking at his points, though, the line's at 18.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10 games. He has hit it in 2 consecutive games. Against centers, it's a good matchup. The Raptors allow the 8th most points to centers. Looking at his head-to-head matchup, he's only hit this once out of his last 4, but he has been very close in all of those games. So he scored 15-plus points in every game against the Raptors, and he scored 15-plus points in 8 out of his last 10 games. So Turner for 15, I might be able to fuck with that. I'm not sure about the 18.5, though. I'm a little bit hesitant on that one. Looking at Aaron Naismith, his points line's at 14.5. It's quite high. Matchup is great. Raptors allow the 3rd most points to small forwards on the season. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games, and in head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in all 3. So I'm a little bit hesitant in that regard. Looking at his rebound prop, though, that's at 4.5, and that's where his line always seems to be. He's gone under in 4 straight, 5 out of his last 10, and the matchup's a bit average. He has gone over in his last 2 games against the Raptors, but there's not enough supporting data here to make me want to jump on Aaron Naismith. Pascal Siakam, his points props at 21.5. The Raptors allow the 9th fewest points to power forwards. So could be a difficult one. This is his first game against his old team. So does that mean anything to you? Would you take him for an over in that aspect? So yeah, look, I'm not too sure. We've seen some players do it more recently. Bradley Beal killed the Washington Wizards. I know that's for sure. We saw Daniel Gafford recently. He killed the Washington Wizards. So, I think the motivational factor will be there for Pascal Siakam. Matchup-wise, somewhat difficult, I would say. But, yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant. But, yeah, that motivating factor is really starting to get to me now. I think that there's probably a good chance. Like, these games are the games where he was playing for the Raptors and it was against the Pacers. So, I wouldn't put too much stock into that. But points-wise, he could deliver. Looking at his other props, though, we'll just look at his recent form. Firstly, assist-wise, the Raptors allow the 13th fewest assists to power forwards. Pascal's hit in 6 of his last 10, so I'm not aroused by that. Rebound-wise, line's at 6.5. Line's at reduced to 128, minus 128. He's only hit this in 4 out of his last 10, and the matchup's not excellent either. So, I think points and assists, I'd lean to an under in those. Not points and assists. Rebounds and assists, I'd lean to the under. Points, I think he's got that motivational factor going on. Neither team's good at playing defense, so they will get up and down. So, I don't mind the over for Pascal, but I just need to sit on that for a minute. Having a look at the other Raptors players. Jakob Poeltl, his points line's at 12.5. The Pacers allow the 9th fewest points to centers, which is crazy because they allow points to every other position, but not the centers. Miles Turner's doing a good job. He's hit this in only 5 of his last 10. And head-to-head matchup, he scored 6 points in the last matchup against them. Rebound-wise, line's at 8.5. Pacers allow the 6th fewest rebounds to centers. He has hit this in 5 out of his last 10. So Jakob Poeltl, I think, is a difficult matchup here. Points and rebounds, probably want to see what the under looks like. We've got a line of 21.5. He has hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Only had 10 in his last game against the Pacers. Played 29 minutes. The matchup is difficult, but not enough data to support that pick. But I do think he goes under in his points and his rebounds. Emmanuel quickly, his points line is at 18.5. In terms of the matchup, the Pacers, pretty mid in terms of points allowed to the point guard, but he's only hit this in 2 out of his last 10 games. And looking at his assists, his line for that is at 5.5. The Pacers allow the third fewest assists to point guards. He's gone under in 4 straight. He did hit in a 5-game stretch just prior to that. So 5 out of the last 10, he's cash. So yeah, quickly, look, I'm a bit hesitant to back him. His lines are always high, and a lot of the time he's not hitting him. So yeah, I don't have too much confidence around Emmanuel quickly. RJ Barrett is a game time decision, but his points and rebounds are usually a good bet these days. But points wise, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. He's struggled in his last 2, Cleveland and the Spurs. The Pacers do allow a lot of points to small forward, so it's a good matchup when it comes to scoring. Looking at his rebounds, though, he's been rebounding very well since playing with the Raptors. He's hit this line of 6.5. It's plus money. He's hit it in 5 of his last 10, and the matchup is good. The Pacers allow the 6th most rebounds to shooting guards small forwards on the season. So, yeah, RJ Barrett, I don't mind the rebound prop at these odds, but he's a game time decision, so I don't know if he's injured or if he's got a flu or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm just going to pump the brakes on that one. So when I look at this game, Tyrese Halliburton assists is probably the pick that I like the most, followed by Pascal Siakam points. But not too much confidence coming out of me right now, so I'll leave it up to you guys, right? Run through the numbers. You make the decision on whether you want to take that bet or not. All right, well, you're looking at the Houston Rockets versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Grizzlies, obviously, a lot of players out, a lot of players game time decision, probably most notably Derrick Rose. Everybody else who's been out is still out. Looking at the Houston Rockets, Fred VanVleet and Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, Reggie Bullock's a game time decision. So the rest of those guys are out. And a lot of those, that's a bit of their wing depth. So your Dylan Brooks, your Jalen Greens, potentially to get more minutes. So we're kicking things off with Jalen Green. He's been playing quite well, provided you pick the right stat, right? So his points line's at 19.5. Memphis Grizzlies allow the 4th fewest points to shooting guards. In terms of his matchup with the Grizzlies, he's covered this in 4 of his last 7, but he's gone under in 2 straight games against the Grizzlies. Last 10 games, he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. Wildly inconsistent. I wouldn't take Jalen Green for points. Looking at his assist prop, though, it has been decent. Minus 135. I wouldn't play that. The Grizzlies do allow the 10th most assists to shooting guards, which is a positive. They're obviously missing Fred VanVleet, so Şengün, Jalen Green pick up the slack, creating points, but that I'm quite hesitant on. He has covered this in 4 straight games against the Grizzlies, though. If this was at better odds, definitely something I consider, but at those odds, I would not, and I wouldn't go near 4.5 for him. And looking at rebounds, he's had some big rebound games over the last 10. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. The Grizzlies allow the 9th fewest rebounds to shooting guards, and he's gone under this in 6 consecutive games against the Grizzlies. So nothing really like for Jalen Green there. Looking at Jabari Smith, his points line's at 14.5. He's covered this in 4 of 7 games against the Grizzlies. The matchup, the Grizzlies are 15th in ranking, so neither good nor bad. And his last 10, he's at this in 4 out of his last 10. So nothing really excited me about Jabari Smith. In terms of rebounds, his line's at 8.5. The Memphis Grizzlies allow the 8th fewest rebounds as power forwards. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, and he's hit this in 3 consecutive games against the Grizzlies. So the matchup is difficult. He's done it more recently against the Grizzlies, and in his last 10, he's hit this in 3 out of his last 4. But still, wildly inconsistent Jabari Smith, so I can't take him with too much confidence. Dylan Brooks, I probably only look at his points prop here, but he's up against his old team. The Grizzlies do allow the 12th fewest points to small forwards. Dylan Brooks scored 26 points in his last matchup against them. Prior to that, he was probably a member of the Grizzlies for a lot of these games. No, so we're looking at these 3 games. He was playing for the Houston Rockets. Looking at his last 10, Dylan Brooks was covered in 5 out of his last 10. He's had 3 20-plus games in his last 4. And I wonder if that's how long Fred VanVleet has been out for. So let me check that out real quick. Games without Fred VanVleet. Yeah. So This is most recent injury, Fred VanVleet, the back end of January. So we're looking at the last, actually, no, it's here. This game here. From Indiana onwards, Fred VanVleet has missed every single game. So really, 3 out of his last 4 games, Dillon Brooks has gone over his points line. In terms of the matchup, the Grizzlies do allow the 10th most points to small forwards. Now, Dillon Brooks, from what I believe, he shoots a lot of 3-pointers. So hang on, let me change this to his last 5 so he can get a better average. This is his 3-point attempts. He's averaging 8.6 3-point attempts per game. He's made 5, 3, 4, 3, 2, and 6. In terms of field goals, he's attempting almost 17 shots per game. So he's taking 17 shots per game. The line that we need for him to cover is 15.5. A lot of these shots are 3-pointers anyway. So I don't mind this for Dillon Brooks, believe it or not. I don't mind this point prop for Dillon Brooks. Up against his old team, got a favorable matchup. The way that their lineup is constructed, he's going to take a lot more shots. I don't mind this. I do not mind this at all. The Grizzlies, a good defensive team, don't get me wrong. I'd say their best perimeter defender is Vince Williams. And I doubt Vince Williams is going to be defending Dillon Brooks. I'm pretty sure we pick up the Jalen Green assignment. That means John Concha will most likely have to pick up Dillon Brooks, and he's not a notable defender whatsoever. So I think Brooks has a really good matchup in this game. I do like this pick. Minus 119 odds. So I'm just going to quickly check my sports book to see what odds I can get for it. If the odds something that I like, I'm going to jump all over it. So let me just check this out. Dillon Brooks over 15.5 points. Where you at, my boy? Dillon Brooks. So $1.80. So that's a little bit juiced. Let's have a look at our friends at Bet365 to see what they give me. Hopefully they're kind. A lot of the time they do have better odds than my other book anyway. But let's take a look here. Player market. Dillon Brooks. $1.83. So slightly better odds. I'm going to fucking rock with it. Dillon Brooks, we're taking his over in this game. Up against his old team with a great matchup. Visiting Memphis, so the crowd's going to be into him. I don't mind that. Dillon Brooks. Let's have a look at Alperen Sengun in this one. His points prop is at 21.5. He's gone under in 4 consecutive games against the Memphis Grizzlies. That's not a good sign. He's gone under in 4 consecutive games overall. He's covered in 3 out of his last 10. In terms of the matchup, the Grizzlies do allow the 8th or 9th most points to centers on the season. But something that's very important to note is that Jaren Jackson Jr. is now playing center. He played power forward for most of the year. They had Tillman at center. They obviously had, what's that guy's name? I was going to say Bam Adebayo. Bismack Biyombo. And now Jaren Jackson is playing center. I think they're better equipped to slow down centers with Jaren Jackson Jr. playing the 5. I do think it's going to be a difficult night for Sengun. I'm honestly leaning on the under for his points prop, but I'm not a big fan of playing unders. Far too stressful. I think I've picked enough unders for the night. But looking at his assist prop, mine's at 5.5. You can get that for plus money. He's hit that in 6 out of his last 10, but he's gone under in every single game against the Memphis Grizzlies. So I don't like that. And looking at his rebound prop, his line's at 9.5. The matchup is great. The Grizz give up a lot of rebounds. He's hit this in 2 of his last 7 against them. And he's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. So, yeah, my favorite pick out of the Sengun bucket is to take the under in points. But if you like overs, rebounds would probably be the best one. But, yeah, I'm not really loving Sengun in this game, in this matchup. Not John Choncha. I didn't want to pick this guy. Let's check Vince Williams. So I bet on this guy quite a bit this season. His points prop is at 13.5. He's gone under in both of his games against the Houston Rockets. In his last 10 games, he's covered this line in 7 out of them. 7 out of his last 10, which is quite crazy. Very consistent in that regard. I don't know if I'd take the 13.5 here because he does get very close to it. The hook is a real possibility, but he has been getting it done on the assist front lately. Check that out. Ooh-wee. Now, the Rockets allow the 10th fewest assists to shooting guards on the season, but Vince Williams Jr. has been killing it lately. 5, 8, 8, and 9 assists. His head-to-head matchups against the Rockets, he has struggled, but these games were in December. He's been in the starting lineup for almost 2 months now, so he's better equipped. They don't have much people to create offense. Gilead's not creating offense. Concha possibly could, but look, their offense sucks regardless, right? But somebody's got to create. Vince Williams has a pretty high usage rate.
His previous form's not too bad. I think in one of these games I bet on his points plus assists, and he did cover, but I just feel like this might be too good to be true. Does he sustain that level of activity when it comes to assists? So, and for the most part, the Rockets are a pretty good defensive team. They're not like the Pelicans who drop their guard. They're not like the Hornets who don't play defense. They're not like the Bulls. The Bulls aren't a great defensive team. They just play slow. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but that would definitely be my favorite pick. Vince Williams overs in assist. Rebounds, let's not even talk about that. He can get 10 rebounds one game and then get 3 rebounds in the next. Highly inconsistent. The next one I want to look at is Amen Thompson. So he's filling in for Fred VanVleet. His points prop. Let's look at his last 5 because that's how long Fred's been gone. He's hit his points prop in 2 out of his last 5 games. The matchup, somewhat decent. Grizzlies ranking 15th. So that doesn't scream out to me. Looking at his assist, he is the starting point guard after all. He's hit that in 2 of his last 5, so that's not great. Rebounds, his prop is so high. His line for rebound is at 9.5, and he's playing point guard. The matchup here is good. The Grizzlies allow the 3rd most rebounds to point guards, and that's because the Grizzlies don't play a point guard that can shoot. So pretty good matchup. He's hit this in 3 out of his last 5 games. You can get this for plus money for him to get 10 rebounds. So this does pique my interest, you could say. But there is a very small sample size here. And if we look at the matchup, he went over against the Pacers, the Hawks, and the Knicks. There was one of these games where I backed him to go over his rebounds. I think it might be this Toronto game. But his rebound line in that game was 7.5. I was sweating whether he'd hit that, and he did hit it. Now his line's at 9.5. He has covered in his last 2, don't get me wrong. His minutes are good, but yeah, I'm still a little bit uncertain. But the matchup is great, don't get me wrong. Matchup is good. His recent form is good. We just don't have a big enough sample size to make a confident decision. But I don't hate that for Amen Thompson. Let's jump into the Washington Wizards versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, Zion Williamson, he's a game time decision. He seems to be a game time decision every single night now, taking a book out of the old man James. But let's have a look at CJ McCollum first. His points prop is at 18.5. The Washington Wizards allow the 17th fewest points to point guards. He has covered this in 3 straight games against the Wizards. In his last 10, he's covered this in 5 of those games, going well under in his last 2. So that makes me a little bit hesitant there. Looking at his assists, his line's at 4.5. He's been going under that heaps. Look at that. He's only covered in 1 out of his last 10. The matchup is great. The Wizards allow the 2nd most assists to point guards. McCollum has covered this in his last 2 games. But even though I don't watch many Pelicans games, right? Looking at the data, something has clearly changed in the way that the New Orleans Pelicans run their offense, whether it's Zion or it's Brandon Ingram, or if they're letting Valanciunas create more of their offense. Pretty much CJ McCollum is not doing that because he's playing the minutes. But for his assist to be this low, this consistently, something has definitely changed. So just because the matchup is good and he's done well against the Wizards in the past, that's not enough for me to take it, given that this is quite compelling, that something has changed. I don't know what it is, but something clearly has. So I wouldn't feel confident taking CJ at that. And looking at his rebound prop, it's at 4.5 as well. The Wizards do give up rebounds to point guards. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. And against the Wizards, 2 out of his last 3. So nothing about CJ has got me a little bit aroused. So let's jump into Brandon Ingram. His points line is at 23.5. In terms of the matchup, the Wizards give up the 7th most points to shooting guards in his last 10. He's gone under it in 4 straight, but he has hit in 4 out of his last 10. And in head-to-head matchups, most recently against the Wizards in December, he scored 40 points. But Brandon Ingram, very inconsistent. I hardly ever bet on his points prop, so I'm not feeling confident about that. I know his rebounds are all over the place as well. I wouldn't bet on that either. Assists might be something I can fuck with. His line's at 6.5, but this is minus 132. The matchup is excellent. The Wizards give up the most assists to shooting guards. Fair enough. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10, but in his last matchups against the Wizards, only 4 and 3 assists. So matchup's good, but he hasn't got it done against them in the past. I'd prefer to avoid that for Brandon Ingram, but do with that information whatever you like. Let's have a look at Zion Williamson in this one. His points props at 23.5. He's covered this in 2 out of his last 5 games, 4 out of his last 10. The matchup is good, like every matchup against the Wizards, who give up the 10th most points to power forwards. He hasn't played the Washington Wizards before, but his points props a bit all over the place. Assist-wise, 4.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, and the matchup isn't great for this one. Rebounds, Zion's not very consistent with it. He's capable, but look at this. 8 and 9, but a lot of games with 2 and 3 rebounds. Playing power forward, you'd expect a lot better. The matchup is okay. The Wizards give it the 10th most rebounds to power forwards, but yeah, I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Zion Williamson either. So let's have a look at these Wizards players. I think these Wizards players are a lot easier to read. They don't have much depth. A lot of their production usually comes from 3 or 4 players. So the first one we're looking at is Kyle Kuzma. His points line is at 19.5. Matchup, the Pelicans give it the 4th fewest points to power forwards on the season. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. And he scored 27 points the last time these teams matched up. It was a high-scoring game. 264 points were scored in that game. And I doubt they score that many in this one. So I do lean to the under, but I wouldn't play an under in this one. He's going to take a lot of shots. And looking at his assist prop, though, for Kyle Kuzma, 3.5. The Pelicans give up the 6th fewest assists to power forwards on the season. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. He's hit this in his last 2 games against the Pelicans. So you can get this at plus money. And you know what I'm like with plus money? It's got my attention. 6 out of his last 10. Last 2 against the Pelicans. The matchup is supposed to be difficult, though. But that's partially why we're seeing good odds for this. So, yeah, look, he got nothing against Dallas, which concerns me. Because that's a good matchup for assists. And he got nothing. So that's enough for me to really hesitate. Looking at rebounds, lines at 6.5. But check this shit out. Only 3 out of his last 10. Pelicans give up the 10th fewest rebounds. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered it every single time. So I can't get a read of this guy at all. Kyle Kuzma. So I'm going to choose not to play him. Denny Advia, he can hit on every single prop. But let's have a look. Points-wise, 14.5. He's covered in 1 of his last 3 against the Pelicans. He's hit this in 3 straight games, though, which is pretty crazy. 20-plus in all of them. 5 out of his last 10. But he's hit this in 5 out of his last 6. Matchup, the Pelicans. They allow the 2nd fewest points to small forwards, so that's going to be difficult. Like I said, 1 out of his last 3 games, he's hit it against them. Looking at his assist prop, though, his line's at 3.5. 8th fewest assists allowed to small forwards. He's hit this in 4 of 10. He had 7 assists in his last game against the Pelicans, but he went under in the last 2. So quite inconsistent with this one. Rebounds, 1 out of his last 3. He's also hit this in 5 out of his last 10, but the matchup is difficult. So, yeah, not too sure what we're going to do about that one. I believe, if my memory serves me correct, I have a play here on Jordan Poole. Now, there's a lot of memes and shit about him because he shoots terribly. They pay him a lot of money. He's not delivering, yada, yada, yada. His points props at 13.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10 games. The matchup is a good one in terms of points. The Pelicans allow the 3rd most points to shooting guards on the season, right? And I've seen this guy throughout this year. When he has a great matchup, there's been a lot of times where he has delivered. Against the Pelicans, though, scored 11 points in his last matchup against them. So he didn't deliver when it comes to scoring the ball. What I did like about him was his assist prop. And for a couple of reasons. 4 assists against the Pelicans the last time they matched up. More recently, he's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, but really 5 out of his last 6 games. The Pelicans allow the 2nd most assists to shooting guards on the season. Jordan Poole is going to play some minutes. He's averaging 28.9 minutes per game. Obviously, if they get blown out, he's not going to play much. But what I do like, well, I don't like this, that he's failed to exceed 3.5 assists in 5 of his last 6 games on the road. But they had a big homestand. 1 game on the road against Dallas, he had 3 assists, but that was a very low-scoring game. For him to get 4 assists at plus money, it did get my interest. So I most likely will take that bet on Jordan Poole. And looking at the other players, Marvin Bagley, he just came back from injury against the Mavs. He scored 12 points in that game. His line's at 11.5. The matchup with the Pelicans is a good one when it comes to scoring points. They allow the 12th most. So outside of the shooting guard position, the center is the other weak link in their defense. And looking at his rebounds, his line's at 7.5. Pretty inconsistent form, right? 8, 3, 8, 1 against the Philadelphia 76ers, and then 13 against the Dallas Mavericks. So the matchup here is good. The Pelicans allow the 7th most rebounds to centers on the season. Now, Marvin Bagley just got promoted into the starting lineup. So let me go back a little bit further. Last 10 games. A lot of these games here onwards. Let me have a look. Actually, a lot of these games, injuries coming off the bench. Daniel Gafford was starting. Daniel Gafford's been traded. The guy that they traded him for is injured. So this Wizards, very thin at that center spot. If Marvin Bagley, if he gets close to 30 minutes tonight, I'm really confident in him covering this line. It is at minus 130 though. So I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to dive into my sports book. I'm going to see what type of odds am I getting, and then I might even take this for 8.5. You know what? I'm not even going to do that right now. I'll do this when the video is done, but I do like Marvin Bagley for rebounds. All right, I just checked my sports book. 7.5 rebounds. The odds are shit for those. I'd like to get an alternate for 9 rebounds because we'll get that for plus money. But for Bagley, I'm just going to bite the bullet here. I'm going to take him for 10 rebounds. It's plus 165, $2.65. I do like him to have a big rebounding game here against Valanciunas. If he does finish on 9, I'll go fuck myself, but hopefully that doesn't happen. So we're looking into the San Antonio Spurs versus the Dallas Mavericks in this game, and I already have a pick for this one, so I'll let you know once I get there. But kicking it off with the matchups firstly and the lineups. So Luka, Kyrie, game time decisions, as well as Maxi Kleber and Dante Exum. So limited markets for the Dallas Mavericks. We'll look at Luka's first. The man's an absolute machine. At 31.5, he's hit this in 7 out of his last 10. The matchup is good. The Spurs are weak in almost every position. They allow the 4th most points to point guards. In head-to-head matchups, Luka's covered this in 3 out of his last 4, scoring 39 most recently in the back end of December. Looking at his assist prop, lines at 9.5. Spurs allow the 6th most assists as point guards. He's hit this in 3 straight games against the Spurs, and in his last 10, he's hit this 5 out of the last 10. And then looking at his rebounds, lines at 9.5. The Spurs allow the 13th fewest rebounds to point guards. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10, and he got this in his last 2 games against the Spurs. So although I think he goes over in all of his lines, obviously the lines are high as fuck, right? So I can't take any Luka plays with confidence at the moment. We don't know if Kyrie's going to play. We don't even know if Luka's going to play. We don't know if this game ends in a blowout. So right now, I'd probably hold on these Dallas Maverick players, but I just wanted to give you the form lines just in case they do play. Kyrie, his line's at 25.5. San Antonio Spurs, 10th most points allowed to shooting guards. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10. He's gone under in both of his games for the Spurs. To be honest, I'd lean to the under in Kyrie's points if Luka is playing. Assist prop, line's at 5.5. Spurs allow the 3rd most assists to shooting guards. Kyrie has hit this in 7 out of his last 10, and he covered in both of his games against the Spurs. But the line, the odds, minus 130, so I'm not a fan of that. His rebound line is at 5.5. You can get that for plus money, but he's gone well under in his last 2 games against the Spurs. And in his last 10, he's covered in 4 out of his 10. So, yeah. That one preferably would take Kyrie unders in points. Getting to the key players here, Sohan, he's been pretty average as of late, but I know the matchup is good for power forwards. Points lines at 10.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. The Mavericks, they do allow the 6th most points to power forwards on the season. Head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 3 straight games. So that's not a bad play. I'm a bit hesitant to bet on somebody who doesn't shoot the ball that much, though, and shoots free throws with one fucking hand. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but I don't think it's such a bad play. Looking at his rebounds, his line's at 5.5. Mavs allow the 12th most rebounds to power forwards. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, and he's gone over in every game against the Dallas Mavericks. So points and rebounds against the Mavs. This motherfucker's been killing it against them. Here's his points and rebound line. It's 18.5. He's covered it in 3 straight against the Mavs quite easily. The matchup is good for both, so I wouldn't be too surprised if he covers that. His recent form is a little bit patchy, though, playing a consistent number of minutes, but he just hasn't got it done. In saying that, Brooklyn, remember this, we spoke about it a bit earlier when we looked at the Boston Celtics matchup. Fewest points, one of the fewest rebounds. And I said, fuck the matchup, I'm taking Tatum anyway. But difficult matchup for Brooklyn, Orlando, Miami, Cleveland. Those are all difficult matchups for power forwards to score and to get rebounds. I think I might be talking myself into taking a Sohan over. So I'm heavily leaning a Sohan over right now. The odds minus 104 Give me a piece of that. Let me have a real quick look at the market to see if it's available. Points and rebounds for Sohan. Ooh, I've got him for 17.5 here. Not at the odds that I want, but 17.5, even better. Checking Bet365 though to see what they have available for young Jeremy. Let's check him out. Points and rebounds. I want to see an 18.5 because I want the better odds. All right, got 18.5. It's for $1.90, which is minus 110. I don't mind that. I think we're taking it, boys. We're taking it. Sohan, let's go. I don't mind this. Okay, now moving on to the next one. Trey Jones. We'll look at his assists. It's consistent, but it's pretty ass at the same time. Points we'll look at too. So he's hit this in 4 out of his last 5 games. 4 out of his last 10 games, sorry. What am I talking about? 4 out of his last 10, he's hit. Matchup's not great. The Dallas Mavericks actually defend point guards quite well. Head-to-head matchups, he did cover in 4 out of his last 5, though. In terms of his assists, his line's at 7.5. He's hit this in only 1 of his last 5 and 5 out of his last 10. And again, the matchup is difficult. So I don't like that for Trey Jones. Let's get into Victor Wembanyama. Points-wise, I think he's been going under this line for quite some time. Oh, he did go over against the Raptors, but prior to that, a lot of unders. 3 out of his last 10. In terms of matchups, Dallas Mavericks allowed 11th fewest points to centers. So I don't like that. Looking at his rebound prop, it's at 10.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. Mavs, decent matchup. He only had 5 rebounds in his last game against the Mavericks. I don't like that. Assist-wise, his line's at 3.5, and you can get this for plus money. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10, but the Mavs allow the 4th fewest assists to centers. So very hesitant to take that either. So when I was talking about the bet that I had for this game, it wasn't Wemby, and it was none of these core stats. I wanted to look at his blocks real quick because he just had that game with 10 blocks. Now the Mavericks, they allow the fewest blocks to 2 centers this season. They don't attack the rim that much, so it might be difficult for Victor to get these blocks. In his last matchup against the Mavs, though, he only had 1 block, right? So his line's at 2.5. If you're brave, you take the under, but I wanted to have a look at that. Looking at steals real quick. For him to get 1 steal, it's only minus 180, so that's ass. What I did take and what I wanted to share was this. His 3-point prop. Over 1.5, it's minus 110. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10 games. And the Dallas Mavericks, they allow the 4th most 3-pointers made to centers on the season. We only need him to make 2. He did make 3 in his last matchup against the Dallas Mavericks. So all the stars are aligning. Matchup is good. Previous form against the opponent is good. Recent form is excellent. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10 games. He's hit this in 15 of his last 20 games. So Victor to get 2 3-pointers. A lot of the time he gets this in the first quarter. So hopefully he can deliver in the first quarter and make it a no-sweat bet. But I do like that for Victor. I've already put that bet on. Having a quick look at Devin Vassell. Points line, 19.5. The Mavericks, it's an easy matchup for him. 5th most points to shooting guards on the season. He did only score 9 points when they last played each other. But in his last 10 games, he's hit this well. 7 out of his last 10. Looking at this game, we scored 9 points. He played 30 minutes. He took 13 shots. He only shot 23% from the field. So maybe a rough shooting night. Possibly he could deliver based on his recent form. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Looking at his assists, the line's at 3.5. It's minus 165. He's hitting 6 out of his last 10. Last matchup with the Mavs, he had 5 assists. So, yeah, it's okay, but it's not getting me hot and horny, let me tell you that. All right, we're jumping into the final game. It's the Clippers versus the Golden State Warriors. And in this game, I've got Chris Paul still out. Kawhi Leonard is a big out for this game. So we're going to keep that in mind as we go through all of these props. Final look at Zubac, top of the list. His point sign's at 9.5. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 6 games against the Golden State Warriors. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. The matchup is neither good nor bad, but he is playing less minutes, 18 to 20 minutes a night. So if he's still on that restriction, I'm going to be hesitant. So I wouldn't bet on anything on Zubac while he's on that. Draymond Green, points-wise, I would never take this man for a points prop, but in head-to-head matchup against the Clippers, he's got it done. 5 out of his last 6. His last 10, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. So looking at how they defend centers, the Clippers allow the fewest points to centers. Rebound-wise, Line's at 7.5. You can get it for plus money. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 10 games and 3 out of his last 6 against the Clippers. So that doesn't get me too excited either. His assist prop, he's covered this in 3 out of his last 6 games against the Clippers, but he's gone under in 3 straight. And in his last 10, he's covered in 6 out of his last 10. So nothing on Draymond that I'm really liking in this game. Klay Thompson, let's have a look at his points prop. Why not? Line's at 17.5. He's hit this in 5 out of his last 7 games against the Clippers, which is pretty good. In his last 10, he's only hit this 4 times. If we want to have a look at matchups, the Clippers allow the 13th most points to shooting guards on the season. So you'd have to be a brave man to take a Klay Thompson prop right now because this season he's been ass. Steph Curry, points lines at 28.5 or 29.5, depending on where you look. The Clippers, mid when it comes to how much points they allow to point guards. They've limited Curry to go under in 3 consecutive games, though. Prior to that, he had a 50-point performance. In Steph's last 10 games, he's covered this line 6 times. So shooting the ball quite well as of late. Game winners and the lot. Against Phoenix, that was great. Massive game against the Pacers. So, look, 29.5. The matchup is somewhat average, and he's gone under in 3 straight games against the Clippers. I'm not saying he's going to go over. I just wouldn't be confident in taking the over for Steph Curry. Looking at his assist prop, though, his line's at 5.5, and you can get that for plus money. The Clippers allow the 9th fewest assists to point guards. He has hit this in 5 out of his last 10. And against the Clippers, he's hit this in 4 out of his last 5. Matchup is difficult. Recent form is average. Historical form is good. I'm not getting a strong enough indication. I honestly would lean to the over for Steph Curry if you wanted to know. I won't be taking that pick, but that's definitely how I'd be leaning. Jonathan Kuminga, his points props at 19.5. He's gone under in every single game against the Clippers. The Clippers allow the 6th fewest points to power forwards on the season. And looking at his last 10, he's covered it in 6 out of his last 10 games. He had 14 points against the Utah Jazz, and he had a great matchup in that one. So that was pretty disappointing. But yeah, look, he probably could get this, but again, I'm not getting a strong read. And at minus 120 odds, it's not something that I'm willing to entertain. At the end of the day, somebody's got to score points for them. I just don't know who it's going to be, right? Rebound-wise, his line's at 5.5. You can get that for plus money. He's covered in 5 out of his last 10. The Clippers allow the 7th most rebounds to power forwards. He's covered in only 2 of his last 7 games against the Clippers. So looking at the Warriors players, there's nothing there that I like. And I'm worried I'm going to feel the same way about these Clippers players. So let's check James Harden. His points prop is 20.5. He's hit this in 4 out of his last 10. The Golden State Warriors allow the 3rd most points to point guards this season. So a good matchup for James. In head-to-head matchups, he's covered this in 2 out of his last 3 games against the Warriors. Recently in December, 28 points against them. So that makes me lean to the over. The other thing is obviously we know Kawhi Leonard's not going to play. So let's check his numbers without Kawhi Leonard. They're not great. He's only covered this in 3 of his last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard. So that doesn't leave me to feel optimistic at all. Matchup is good, but yeah, form, not so good at all. But checking his assist prop, line's at 8.5. It's minus 131, which is not good. The Warriors allow the 10th most assists to point guards. 4 out of 10 he's hit. Whoa, an assist in his last game against the Golden State Warriors, though. So that's interesting. Let's check his assist prop in games without Kawhi Leonard. Last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard, he's hit this in 6 out of his last 10. So I think he'll go over, but at those odds, I wouldn't be comfortable playing it. So checking his rebound prop, though. The matchup is okay. He's hit this in 8 out of his last 10, which is good. Against the Warriors, he had 7 rebounds in his last matchup against them. Looking at his last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard in the lineup, who is one of their key rebounders, you'd assume James Harden would pick up the slack. And yeah, he's been decent. He's covered his rebound line in 8 of his last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard. So that game also includes playoff games, right? From last season. So those you can get rid of. If we look at just 2023, 4 games without Kawhi Leonard, he's hit this twice. So let me correct that. I want to check his points prop again with the same filters. So without Kawhi Leonard for 2023, yeah, he's covered his points line in 2 out of his last 4. So yeah, not liking what I'm seeing from James Harden. The other one is Paul George. His points line's at 25.5, and he's hit. I feel like he's hit this once in his last 20 games. He's had this in one in his last 10, believe it or not. Check that out. 33 points against the Pistons, gone under in every other game. Looking at his last 20 games, he's hit this in 5 of 20 games. The problem is, we see the game, we see that Kawhi Leonard's out, right? So you would assume Paul George is going to score a lot more, and he does. He's covered this in 4 out of his last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard. This season, Kawhi Leonard's missed 4 games, and Paul George has played in them. Paul George has gone under in all 4 games without Kawhi Leonard. So, yeah, look, I am leaning to the under despite Kawhi Leonard being out. Paul George has struggled when Kawhi Leonard's not there, or struggled to hit this line. With Kawhi Leonard in the lineup, last 10 games, Paul George has struggled full stop. So points-wise, leaning to the under for sure. Assists. I've been taking his assists lately, taking the over. His line's at 3.5. The last time I took his assist prop, it was 2.5 against the Timberwolves, I believe. I'm pretending like I don't know. It was 2.5. It was against the Timberwolves, and it was plus money. So that cashed for us nice and early. The line's now 3.5. Let's check his assist prop in the 4 games without Kawhi Leonard this year. Does it get better? It does not really. So 2 out of his last 4 without Kawhi Leonard. Yeah, shit. The Warriors have the 3rd fewest assists to small forwards. So, look, even on that one, I lean to the under. If I lean to the under on the rebounds prop, I'm going to have to look at his PRA. Looking at his last 10, he's only hit this line in 3 of his last 10. The Warriors allow the 10th fewest rebounds to small forwards. Head-to-head matchups. Yeah, he did cover it in his most recent one, but got under in every other one. And let's check the 4 games without Kawhi Leonard. How well did he rebound? 2023. He covered this in once in the 4 games. So let's look at his PRA. His PRA is higher than that. 34.5. 34.5 in his games without Kawhi Leonard. He's gone under this PRA in all 4 games. When you look at the matchup, points allowed, it's an okay matchup. Rebounds and assists, it is a difficult matchup for him. Points-wise is where he probably has the best advantage, but that's where he's been terrible anyway. If you're looking at an under of 34.5, you can get that for plus money. Okay, so that's interesting to me. 4 games without Kawhi Leonard, this has cashed. Last 10 games without Kawhi. Actually, let's remove Kawhi Leonard. The last 10 games in general, it's cashed in 9 out of his last 10. And his last 5 games against the Golden State Warriors, it cashed 4 out of the 5. Most recently against the Warriors, that was in early December, he went over. But I'm really leaning to the under here. And if I can look, I'm going to look at it right now. If I can get close to plus money for this Paul George under 34.5 PRA, I think I'm going to take it because I get a feeling when I look at these lines, and I've been back in that feeling for the past few days, and it's been delivering. So let me check this out. Points, rebounds, and it's because the other option here is just looking at an under in his points, right? Paul George, 34.5. It's $1.86. It's like $1 minus 114. So I'm not seeing the value on Bet365, but I might see it on my other sports book because they know people like to play overs. So let's check it out. Points, rebounds, and assists for Paul George. Yep, it's $1.93. So much better odds on this one. PG unders on the PRA. I don't mind that. Or would points be better? I'm talking as if you guys are going to respond to me. Clearly, you're not going to because this is a recording. But yeah, points-wise, 25.5. He's gone under in 9 of his last 10. He's gone under in his last 4 games without Kawhi Leonard. But I also don't like his performances and rebounds and assists. The matchup is difficult, and his performances have been crap. I'm taking the PRA. Fuck it. It's happening. Take the under 34.5. I'm not telling you to, but I am. So that's Paul George. So if we don't like James Harden, we don't like Paul George to produce, surely that means Russell Westbrook or Norman Powell are going to step up, right? Let's check it out. Points-wise for Norman Powell. Line's at 14.5. He's hitting 5 out of his last 10. It's difficult. Warriors are the 10th fewest points. in head-to-head matchups. He did score 21 points most recently against them. But let's check Norman Powell without Kawhi Leonard. So, in the 4 games without Kawhi Leonard this year, he only played 2 of them. He only scored 7 and 13 points. So, Norman Powell, he's out of the question. So, does our man Russell Westbrook, is he the one to step up in Kawhi Leonard's absence? Well, he's covered this in 2 of his last 5 games against the Warriors, went under in both the games this year. We know matchup-wise, it's a good one. So James Harden has the same matchup as Westbrook. It's a good scoring matchup for point guards. Westbrook hasn't taken advantage of that in the past, but in his last 10 games, he's hit this 5 times. Let's check out the games without Kawhi Leonard. Do we see much green? We do. We certainly do. So, Russell Westbrook was a member of the Clippers in all these games. 9 of his last 10 games without Kawhi Leonard, he's gone over. We look at the games Kawhi Leonard has sat out this season. Westbrook has covered in 3 out of the last 4. The game against the Boston Celtics, he scored 12. Now, what could deter me from taking this bet is the odds, because on this we're seeing minus 118. I prefer to take things at plus money, so the line at 12.5. Yeah, that one's not great. $1.84. I do like Westbrook though, so I am a little bit biased. I'm just giving you a heads up. And I bet 365, his market's not available. So I'm a little bit hesitant to pull the plug on that one. But let's check his assists out. Last 10 games, he's only hit this in 3 out of his last 10, and he went under in his last 2 against the Warriors. Let's check the games without Kawhi Leonard for this year. Westbrook 4, 5, 6, and 6. So he's racked up the assists quite well without Kawhi. Let's check his rebounds. Last 10. He's gone under every single one. So his line's at 5.5. Obviously, they're making the assumption he's going to rebound like an animal with no Kawhi Leonard. So that's what I'm really interested to see. Is that true? Are the sports books right? No Kawhi Leonard. 2023. They are fucking right. Check that out. 13, 5, 11, and 6. So points, rebounds, and assists is what I'm thinking about. In his last 5 games, he hasn't got close to this, right? But the Clippers are missing their best player in this game. I think this game is going to be close too. So negates the blowout. This is Russell Westbrook's PRA without Kawhi Leonard. 30 points, 30 against Phoenix, 32 against OKC, 22 against Boston, 31 against Charlotte, and 26 against the Memphis Grizzlies. Minus 102. So the odds are pretty good for this one. Let me just see what odds I'm getting for Russell Westbrook PRA. We know he's going to play hard, that's for sure. I'm getting $1.95. That's pretty good. I'm taking that. Russell Westbrook. We're taking PG under in the PRAs. We're taking Russell Westbrook overs. If I've read this game completely wrong, PG is going to go over and Westbrook goes under and we get smacked from both sides. But I'm hoping my man Brody delivers. So, that's pretty much the last game. So there's no lines out for the Lakers game. For those of you who are going to leave comments saying, oh, you didn't do one for the Lakers versus the Jazz, there's no markets out at the moment, so I can't preview that game. Obviously, I'll have a look at it tomorrow, and if I do have a best bet, I'll be sure to share it. Look, if you guys did make it this far, I do appreciate you. Thank you so much. The support that I've been getting as of late has been overwhelming, to say the least. A lot of subs, a lot of likes, a lot of comments, so I do appreciate you. If you haven't already, like this video. Sub to the channel if you're new, and enjoy the theme song, baby.
To the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.